Welcome, everybody, and certainly happy holidays, happy New Year to everybody out there. Thank you for joining us on today's Farr and Beyond Podcast. I'm really excited to be talking to Michael Schlossman, but before we get into our conversation, I just have to remind you, please take a moment, like the show, subscribe to the channel, and certainly hit the bell so that you'll be reminded when we have shows coming up. Share with your friends as well. But we have this being Farr and Beyond Podcast, and Farr being the Florida Association of Recovery Residences. We have the CEO, the HLIC, which is head lawyer in charge, and the coolest guy I know, Michael Schlossman, with us. Michael, how are you, brother?
My official title is cat herder.
Herder.
I herd cats for a living. That's what I do. No, I'm doing great, Scott, and great to see you. Happy holidays, brother, and happy New Year. It's been a wonderful year, and I'm looking forward to 2025.
It really has been a great year, and I want to talk about that. But let's talk about when did you get involved with Farr? Because, you're not a new kid on the block, but you're still, this is relatively new to you. When did you get involved, and why did you get involved?
So so everybody understands this and we're on the same page, I am the least likely human being to be the CEO of the Florida Association of Recovery Residences because I'm an attorney and clinician by trade. And I came up in the ranks before Farr was created, and certainly during Farr's controversial years of being implemented. And although the statute was voluntary, there was a lot of confusion over it. There was a lot of pushback from the clinical providers of why do we need this, and another hoop to jump through. But I bought a recovery residence in about 2018 with a couple of partners, and I got a call from the then executive director asking me if I would be on the board of Farr. And by the way, in all transparency, I'm a person in long-term recovery. I am defined by my very nature. I don't like change. I certainly don't like people telling me what to do. And my favorite expression around the office at that time was, what the F does this have to do with Farr? I really didn't understand why we needed to be Farr certified, because I didn't see any ROI, any return on investment from membership, other than the ability to take and receive referrals from DCF licensed providers. The other thing that we needed Farr certification for was, in the city of Delray Beach, in order to get a reasonable accommodation, we needed to be Farr certified. So I sort of paid it. I looked at it a little bit as blood money, and
Right.
I became very, very frustrated, as did most people who are still on the Farr board. I became very, very frustrated with the leadership and the direction of the board. The finances were a disaster. We were technically bankrupt. There was self-dealing going on in the board. I can go on and on and on. And I threatened to leave and almost left 3 or 4 times. A couple of board members did leave. And Scott, I think you'll understand this. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution.
Right.
And so I went from being the contrarian to offering what was at the time a minority voice of how we could reform this whole thing. And lo and behold, came a new president of the board who cleaned house and was willing to listen. And so I'm glad we stuck around. I'm glad I stuck around. And then about 9 months ago, we were searching. We were without an executive director for about 2 years, and the executive committee was running Farr every Friday morning for 2 years. Really, dealing with everything from HR to grievances to complaints, and I was on the executive committee. I was the chairperson of our compliance committee. I was the chairperson of our procedures committee, and we realized we needed somebody at the helm who knew what they were doing, and also potentially a staff attorney, because our general counsel, who's wonderful, Susan Ramsey, is a volunteer, and we both were just up to our eyeballs in work to do. And we make plans, and God laughs, and I got offered the job as a combined CEO and chief legal officer. And I got to tell you, Scott, I love it. I just love it. And,
well, this is definitely the case of there's 2 tragedies in life. One is not getting what you want. The other one is getting what you want. I got to ask, we're
go ahead.
talking about like this past that it was almost like this kind of pay us and you'll be safe. It was almost extortion money on the streets in the old days, as far as, only because it really wasn't explained and the vision wasn't shared with the community. There wasn't a lot of that. So are we talking about a total reinvention, or are we talking about returning to what it was meant to be at the beginning?
I think it's a little bit of both, if I'm telling you the truth. And listen, there is some blame to lay on a couple of individuals, but the problem was more systemic than that. The problem was this statute that got passed, which was essentially an unfunded mandate with no public funds available to support it. And so I will say this about the people that were there: they were very well-intentioned people who were trying to do the best they could on nickels and dimes.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. One of my frustrations. Listen, I live in Palm Beach County. I work in Palm Beach County. I've been a provider in Palm Beach County, so I benefited from the fact that Farr, although it's a statewide entity, was essentially Palm Beach centered, with a lot of interaction with the Palm Beach County Task Force, which is an incredible organization. The difficulty is that if you're trying to be a statewide agency and you don't have statewide reach and you're doing inspections by Zoom, we're really selling, our intent. The intent of FAR is to protect not only our providers but its residents, and that was a very difficult thing for me to understand. Of how are we protecting someone in Pensacola when we don't even have eyes on the place?
Right.
So I think we're finally able. Listen, FAR is finally self-supporting on its own contributions. It's a nonprofit corporation, which has very healthy books these days. It's a complete turnaround. Again, in 2018, no joke, at my first board meeting, the treasurer at the time put up the P&L, and I said, "Is it just me, or are we bankrupt?" Our liabilities outweighed our assets far and beyond. And so I offered a suggestion at the time as an attorney of, let's declare bankruptcy and reorganize and protect ourselves from these debts. And in any case, we were able to dig out from under that. And today we have no debt on our books that I know of, and we're profitable to the point that we can now take that revenue and put it back into the company. And one of the things that I have set out to do is, within the next year, to have regional offices set up in the FAR 6 regions, and they mirror the 6 DCF regions because we have so much overlap with DCF. So we already have Palm Beach County because that's where we're centered. We just opened up our first, which is in Suncoast. It's in Tampa. We're looking next at Jacksonville, and within a year, I think it might happen within 6 or 9 months if things continue the way they are. We'll have 6 regional offices that are fully functioning and able to do certifications and renewals and inspections and business development and community relations and all the things that you just brought up that FAR was intended to do, but maybe didn't have the ability to do. So that's just one small difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's you can't set up a 5-star restaurant with a food truck mentality or food truck revenue. Yeah. You needed to change those things so you can, and you're operating in one of the most difficult states in the country.
Yes.
To operate, because you talk about these 6 zones, but you could say pretty specifically, you could cut Florida into about 4 pieces and have completely different cultures in each one of those sections. Is that something you're dealing with too? Is just the culture of the area, or learning those cultures?
It is. Again, I could go through maybe 10 or 20 things that we've implemented or have on the boards to implement very soon. One of them are mandatory quarterly meetings by Zoom. And we didn't have a lot of contact with our providers. I'll give you an example. At the beginning of COVID, when everyone was petrified as to what's going to happen and where do we house people and how do we separate them and are we going to be, prohibited from coming to work, I remember calling the FAR office and there was no plan in place for any sort of thing, which is understandable. It was, first time this has happened in 100 years. Yeah. But the difficulty is that the infrastructure didn't exist. The procedures didn't exist for helping this out. And what is happening in Palm Beach County, as you're right, is very different than what's happening in the Panhandle. So what these quarterly meetings, and we separate them by region, allow us to do is to identify the top 2 or 3 issues that's in that region, which we now know about because we're much more involved, and to specifically address those quarterly meetings to that region. The one that comes up all the time, Scott, is in 397, 487, which is Farr's authorizing statute. There was an amendment made a couple of years ago that allowed a provider to essentially discharge a resident who was, a problem, had relapsed, all sorts of things, and just needed to go. It was irrespective or regardless of landlord-tenant law. So FAR certified facilities were no longer being looked at under landlord-tenant law, because if you wanted to evict someone under LT law, you have to go to court, you have to get an eviction notice, you'd have to evict them. It was a process, and it could ruin your community. The difficulty is that in order to get that message out to the local cop on the street, take some education and outreach. And so we had a lot of places where providers were calling the police for help because they had a person who had a recurrence of use and they were violent or whatever the deal was. And the police said, listen, you got to go to court and get an eviction. And the provider is showing them the statute. And it's not the police officer's fault. It's not really their job to be interpreting law on the fly. So we've done a lot of work on that issue with local police departments. But this is not all over.
And just educating not only the police and the communities, but the homeowners themselves, or the house owners themselves. And then certainly the client's Bill of Rights. That's all stuff that you worry about at FAR. And also making sure that you have the contracts in place so that you have the ability, because putting that contract in place is so important that somebody knows, if I don't do this, I have to leave this residence. And
well, that's exactly right. And by the way, let me just say that we're not in favor. As a matter of fact, we're very much against just dumping onto the street when you have a problem resident.
Oh, so, certainly not. Absolutely not.
Yeah. So we're clarifying that this statute is not to be used as a dumping policy, because then we have a whole different problem on our hands. And so here's the steps to take. So there's Scott, I would say that if I'm taking a larger view of this whole thing, FAR has matured and has come to the point where it's time for more specifics rather than generalities. Right. Across a whole bunch of things, from dumping to removing residents to admissions policies to the role of the CRRA and what their responsibilities are, drug testing policies, medically assisted treatment policies, increasing MAT bed capacity. I could go on and on and on.
Yeah. And you've put, you mentioned earlier, you want to have brick and mortars in all these different locations. Right. You've already got FAR people spread out throughout the state now, and you're doing better with that. So now you've got somebody who can be on the spot, which is terrific. How about your relationship with Tallahassee and even with like DCF? Has that been a focus of yours, is to build that relationship, get eyes and ears and a voice in Tallahassee?
Yeah, listen, you and I both know this issue of recovery and drug abuse and the opioid epidemic. It's not something we can do in a silo. And FAR was a very siloed organization and had a lot of resentments against other organizations, probably based on nothing but fear, to tell you the truth. And so we've spent a lot of time reaching out to all stakeholders who honestly, some of them were skeptical at first of, we've heard this before, and now 6 months down the line, because I took over in June, we're now welcomed at the table, and we come and we're asked to present all sorts of topics. So Tallahassee, DCF and Tallahassee for sure. We were operating for years because our authority does not come directly from Tallahassee. The authority goes from Tallahassee to DCF, and then essentially, for lack of better words, is subcontracted out to FAR. So FAR's parent, if you will, or authorizing agency is DCF. So we now work hand in hand with them on a whole bunch of issues. Tallahassee, we were very fortunate to get our first state appropriation. And we're using that appropriation was funded for one reason and one reason only, for education and outreach on a whole bunch of issues. And so what we're a part of, and I know you're a part of this as well. What we're a part of now is going across the state and setting up what we're calling brunch and learns. It's an opportunity to be there, to invite community members into an informal gathering, have some food, share a little history about Farr, where we're going, what's happening, our priorities, two things of which are increasing MAT bed capacity, implementing these levels of support that have now been codified across the state, getting our data analysis up and running, because without data, the world doesn't really work that well.
Exactly.
That's something, by the way, that I've had to catch up to speed with, because I'm not really a data organized person. I am now, and I understand the importance of data. If you're going to go ask a public entity for funding, the question that they're going to have is, show me the data. Yeah. And so we're in the process now of setting up systems to organize and analyze that data. And there's a real lack of it in this field, as you know. So,
and it's all laying out there for you, because we know what the issues are out there.
Right.
But you've got to put it together so it makes sense in some sort of readable fashion.
That's right.
And something that's quantitative as well, that's saying, we could show you this, and we could show you how we can move the needle too.
Right. I can tell you till I'm blue in the face that recovery rates are increased in Farr certified facilities over uncertified Farr facilities. But my data would be anecdotal at best right now.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and that's not going to fly for a state appropriation or to be taken seriously in any form.
This is good stuff. And the traveling that you're doing, and like you said, I've been there for some of it, and there's so many great people involved. I'd love to do a whole list of thank yous to all the great people at Farr, but if we forget somebody, it'd be a problem. So thank you, everybody. But one of the things I also see is that you're making connections throughout the community, not just for the housing or for the people, but with the RCOs, with different treatment modalities and centers. You're building all sorts of connections with all of that as well, aren't you?
Any kind of stakeholder, public entities, public officials, first responders, obviously our providers, people who are Farr detractors. Listen, there's a lot of people who still think the way I thought in 2018. And I'm not going to argue with them about it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to agree with them. But what I ask people to do is, don't judge us by our past, judge us about how we operate moving forward. And then if we still have a problem, now it's my problem.
Well, that's interesting, because you were such a, poo-poo on all of this, and now, and I know for a fact, I've heard you say it to the staff, and make sure you invite the people who disagree too, because we need to hear what they're saying.
No, it's absolutely right. Because I'm not the only person in long-term recovery or in any kind of recovery that's defined by their very nature and doesn't like authority. I understand that. I think it's, so I come at this with a great amount of love and empathy. And I always remind people that we're all here talking about this because lives are at stake. The statutes and the fundraising, the donations and the brunch and learns and all that is all well and good. But the reality of it is that our people are still dying. And we have to do better than we did, because Farr was created largely out of the mess that was taking place in South Florida in the early 2000s. So the stakes are very, very high. And I never forget that. I just passed 14 years of sobriety. And 14 years ago on December 6, 2010, listen, I was almost one of those opioid overdose victims. I swallowed 400 pills, washed it down with some stuff. And man, I was, inches and seconds away. So this is really, really close to my heart. And I think that's why I love it so much, Scott.
It seems that there's so much, and congratulations on your time. And, me being in a similar boat, for my time back years and years ago, one of the things I noticed before I got fully involved with Farr and everything that they were doing was that there's so much attention paid on the front end of recovery and on the front end of getting treatment and services. But the back end has been largely ignored. This isn't just a Florida problem. This is all over. They don't understand just how important that back end of recovery is, which is recovery homes, recovery houses, supportive services on the other side of treatment. Do you guys find that you're kind of shining a light on that as well?
Well, listen, I didn't pick a very glamorous company or a glamorous field to get involved with, because recovery housing is not exactly what people want to talk about or hear about. The reality of it is, Scott, is that having been trained in a clinical environment and having had caseload after caseload and hundreds of clients, I recognize exactly what you're talking about, that, someone can stay sober for 15, 28 days, 56 days, whatever the deal is. And then there's a drop off the second they leave. And so what I really liked about the recovery residence field, just as a clinician, as a person in long-term recovery, as a member in good standing of a 12-step fellowship, that I had people to work with, because that's after all why I love this. I love working one-on-one with people, or just having a conversation, because I know what it's like to be in early recovery, to have 13 days sober and you're out of your mind, right? Yeah. And you've lost everything and your family won't speak to you. And how am I going to do this? And it's overwhelming. That's why I love this. So having someone for longer than 28 days or 2 months, and having them for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 3 years, is I think it's, to overuse a phrase, I think it's where the magic happens. And you're right, not enough attention was being paid to that. And so we're attempting to put the focus back on that. And I'm not the only one. This comes out of a ROSC-oriented system that's been around forever, recovery-oriented system of care, which recognizes this fact that treatment, and love treatment, it saved my life. I have tons and tons of friends who are dedicated clinicians, volunteers, case managers, admissions, people, all sorts of things, who work their blood, sweat, and tears to help people. But if we're not prepared to take them and help them grow after the initial phase of sort of drying out, then we're all just sitting ducks, waiting for a recurrence of use to happen. So this is why I picked this on purpose. I think this is where God said we can be most helpful. I don't know.
And Farr has this unique opportunity, and it is starting to fulfill that role of people who are doing things for the right reasons, need support, they need guidance, they need someone in their corner, so that when hard things happen, and they will happen, any business, they have somebody to back them up. Before Farr really had a strong footprint as it does now, there were a lot of people out there who started for the right reasons, but ended up taking shortcuts and doing things just because they didn't have the assistance and the help. Yeah. And so we saw a lot of bad characters out there, and unfortunately they got all the press, right?
Yeah.
But that now we're seeing you guys in that supportive role, where somebody who wants to do the right thing, and there's always going to be somebody doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be every business. I don't care if it's a restaurant, a hospital, a lawyer, a car salesman, or a sober living. There's always going to be somebody doing something. But all the people who want the support now have a place to turn to. And you guys really will try to do everything you can to help them, don't you?
Anything and everything. And, you talked about be careful what you wish for, because Farr has taken on a rightful duty as an enforcement agency of our own policies. And so the problem is that the more we look, the more we find. And so there are still a lot of very bad characters out there doing things for exactly the wrong reason, cheating the system. And that's all well and good. If someone can look at themselves in the mirror and do that, that's fine. Again, the difficulty is people's lives are at stake.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
This is not, we're not running a bakery here.
Exactly. I've seen so many changes in this past year. 2024 has been absolutely amazing. All the work that you've done and everyone else. Mm-hmm. Certainly you're not a one-man show there. And they've tried the one-man show before. It doesn't work. I mean, you need the team. Are you proud of what you've accomplished this year? Looking at all the changes and the things that you've overcome?
I'm proud of what we accomplished this year, recognizing that we're showing up to the game late, and there's a lot of work to do and a lot of very serious work to do. And I to pick up on what you just said, we have the most amazing staff that I've ever worked with. for everybody who works for us is dedicated to this mission. I'm not sure you'd be working for Farr if you weren't, because it's not the most, like I said, it's not the most glamorous thing in the world. But I think we're making a difference, Scott, and we have a lot more to do. So I don't think it's time, just to use a recovery phrase, I don't think it's time to rest on our laurels at all. And I know you're not suggesting that.
No, not at all.
I think we're at the point now where we can finally say, okay, we've turned the battleship, which was very difficult to turn. And thanks to the work of the board and our volunteers and our staff and of everybody and the providers and the community and the stakeholders, the battleship is now turned. Now, where is it going to sail?
Now, I should have done this earlier. I'm going to pop this up right now. If you are involved in a sober living, thinking about starting one, this is the number you want to call, 561-299-0405, or go to info@farronline.org. And certainly if you want to go right to the website, it's farronline.org. Yeah. But I'll put that information back up at the end of the show just to remind everybody.
And one of the exciting things for 2025 is we have a brand new website launching.
Oh, that's great.
And it's beautiful and it's intuitive and it's got lots of information on it, and it really streamlines and makes everything so much more simple than it was before.
Yeah, and so the new website's coming. You've started all of this. You're going to continue with the education and the outreach and opening. What is your big goals for 2025? Can you share any of those with us right now? Or
so, first of all, increasing everything we've talked about, because we've just gotten the ball rolling on everything from regional offices to education and outreach to quarterly meetings to brunch and learns to increasing MAT bed capacity, which is probably a whole other podcast, quite frankly.
Yeah,
it's a controversial thing. And just like my relationship with Farr evolved, my relationship with medically assisted treatment has evolved. And that's probably too long to go into on this podcast. But to implementing, working hand in hand with DCF in implementing the levels of support that Farr offers from 1, 2, 3, and 4 being part of a clinical treatment center. We have a lot of work to do with that because there's still a lot of places that don't have Farr certification. And it's not about the Farr, it's not about the certification. It's not about the bed fees. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about the safety, stability, and support that are given to the residents that live there. And so there's still a lot of work to do. So the goals are pretty clear. I had set up a 2-year plan. And we're 6 months into a 2-year plan, and I would say right now we're ahead of the game, but we could easily get overwhelmed and be behind the 8 ball. But I think we have very, very good momentum going into 2025.
And as you mentioned, you've got the staff that's willing to take it on because everyone is dedicated to the mission. I wanted to ask you, sometimes we skip over it a little bit, and you just mentioned it a touch, is that the client's rights are also your concern as well, not just how the business is being run and the owners and making sure they file and do all the stuff they're supposed to, but you're really concerned with client rights as well. Is that something where somebody can reach out to you and find out, is this right or is this wrong, and where clients can ask you?
For sure. There's a bunch of ways to reach us. One is by calling, the other is the email that you put up there. But on our website, even our current website, there are a couple of forms you could fill out. You can fill out a grievance report. And those grievance reports get reviewed every single day. And then we have a weekly staff meeting on those. And our staff knows that if anything that comes in that's life, health, or safety oriented, they should call me and jump up and down, and we'll take care of that right away. And that's how we find out about most of this stuff. So just know that if you're filing a grievance, it remains anonymous. We never, ever, ever will release your name to the person who you're filing the grievance against. And we encourage it. And these things happen. I'll give you a quick example. And this isn't limited to the one provider we just dealt with. We just dealt with a provider that was using the client's EBT cards, collecting them all, buying community food, and then putting it in refrigerators and freezers that had locks on it. And that was very disturbing to me because the EBT cards belong to the residents. The money on those EBT cards belong to the residents. The food that's bought with those EBT cards belong to the residents. And how dare you put a lock on their own food? I mean, these are human beings.
Right.
Scott, as strange as it sounds, we deal with this stuff in 2024, 2025, where people are doing things that are just inhumane, quite frankly. And I'm using that word on purpose.
Well, I think it's been easier to get away with that stuff in the past,
I think so.
with much more oversight and places for clients who see something can say something that really is going to help that.
Yeah.
If I could ask, I'm sure people out there are wondering how many sober livings exist. I know you probably don't have the exact number in front of you, but how many sober livings exist in Florida, and then how many right now are covered by Farr?
Well, the answer is we don't know how many are not covered by Farr because we only know the knowable. Okay. We don't know how many are out there. I can give you what I believe is going on. We have about 250 certified providers across the state, which have about 10,000 beds.
All right.
And that is, we are the largest Farr NAR affiliate in the country. And that's happened very, very quickly. One of the goals is to be up around 1,250, 1,500. But my experience has mostly been in the Delray Beach area and in Palm Beach County and Jupiter. I can tell you that in Delray Beach, the amount of uncertified providers is probably 20 to 30% higher than the amount of certified providers. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad provider. Right. And again, certification in Florida is still a voluntary thing under most situations. But we are trying to, again, this all came out of the mess of the early 2000s, and people were clamoring for change and clamoring for certifications and regulation and standards. And so Farr was created to provide that, and there's still people that are pushing against that. And I guess from a personal standpoint, that's okay. But I'm trying to. Many are using the excuse of, we don't want to be Farr certified to continue to pull the same shenanigans that were going on in the early 2000s. And that's the concern. But we don't know the number. But the number is high. It is significant. And it's certainly something that hopefully we can move the needle on that going into the new year. We have a ton of work to do in Miami, a ton of work. Yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, a couple of years spent just in Palm Beach County, I mean, that could keep you busy just there alone. Because you're right, that is the highest concentration. But then you got other areas like Miami and up in there's some hot pockets in Jacksonville and different areas like that. So well, we went from barely having a presence in Broward 6 months ago to now being firmly established in Broward. And so one of the first things that we did was we shored up our flanks, Broward to the south and then the Treasure Coast to the north. And we're very, very solid in Broward right now. Treasure Coast is a little bit more of an evolving situation, but we've made a lot of inroads. And now we're moving over to the Tampa area and then into Jacksonville. And after that, it'll be South Florida into Miami and the Keys. Not a lot of providers in the Keys, but a lot in Miami that are uncertain. Now, when's the new website going to be up? Do we have an idea? It's going to be up about the second week of January. Oh, perfect. Right at the beginning of the year. Yeah, it's going to be absolutely beautiful. We'll be putting out newsletters. Again, communications is key, and we haven't had enough communication with our providers. So I've said to them all, hopefully within 6 months, you're going to ask us to stop sending you communications because we overload you with information. But better we send them more than less. People will be able to go on the site, find out what events you're going to be doing, even things like you had a great picnic in 2024, had a great, hopefully going to repeat that again this year. For sure. Just hopefully not when it's 118 degrees outside. Yeah. We're actually bidding to get to bring the NAR 2025 conference here. We're hoping that happens next October, November. That'll be the first time it's ever held in Florida. That's fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic. Are you getting good feedback from NAR, which is the National Association of Recovery Residences? Are you getting good feedback from them? Is that are they feeling good about what you're doing down here? Or? I think so. No, they are. They're. By the way, they're very, very supportive. They've been very welcoming of everything that we're doing. They're always available to answer questions or provide support. They have a ton of seminars and meetings and all sorts of stuff that we attend, and we're very honored to be their affiliate. I am excited for 2025, my friend. Yeah. This is going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of work, but you got like you said, you got the right people.
The residences that are involved are fantastic, and it's wonderful to see them involved, and even the RCOs and everybody else coming together, and our first responders. It's terrific stuff. I'm going to ask you one last question here because we've actually blown through our time.
Okay.
So we have no time for South Park talk today, unfortunately. We'll put that off to our fifth show. No, but I got to say, somebody sitting watching this right now saying, I do everything right. I don't need them. I do everything right. I don't want somebody looking over my shoulder. What do you want to say to them?
First of all, I understand where they're coming from because I've been in that situation. I will tell you that there's no other way for me to put this but in recovery terms. I realized I had a resentment. Whether it was justified or not, I had a resentment, and I didn't want to have a resentment. And I did inventory after inventory and talked to, my mentors about it. And I opened my mind just a little bit. Was horrified at first by what I saw, and then was, very honored to be part of the solution. And things have changed. So all we're asking for is a conversation. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're struggling, if you're in a mess, if you've made bad decisions, you're not turning people away because as long as they're willing to try, and you'll be in their corner to help them, right?
That's right. And I should say this. I should have said this up front. Our mission is not to ding providers, to revoke their certification, to suspend their certification. Our mission is to help people get into compliance. So we have lots and lots of troubled providers that are having troubles, not because they're bad providers, just because maybe they don't understand how to set up a medical observation report or are not doing UAs correctly or whatever. We actually take time and sit down and train them to do it. And we give them templates and organization, and we're always here for questions. And we spend a good amount of our day answering those types of questions. If I got a person sitting in front of me for admissions, here are the facts, X, Y, and Z, what do I do? And we're happy to provide that support. And if we don't know the answer, we'll find out the answer and we'll get right back to them.
But there's so many areas where you guys have become almost like a turnkey operation for this. We know how to do this. Here's the stuff, and you can do it too. And it works out really, really well.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. I'm very proud of what you guys have done. I want to put it up one more time, and please remind everybody that if you have any questions about sober living, sober homes, or if you want to know which ones in your area have been vetted and that are a part of Farr, you call 561-299-0405. You can go to farronline.org or email them at info@farronline.org. Just ask the questions, but you're there every step of the way for them, aren't you?
I'm thick in this thing, yeah. and we drafted you too, Scott. So thank you for your service and your help.
Well, anything, if our efforts make a difference and saves one life or makes one life better, then it's worth it, no matter what we have to do. So if we got everybody kind of with that kind of mindset, it's amazing what we'll be able to get done. We're losing the battle out there, folks. It's the end of the year, 2024. Overdose deaths did not go down. Drug use has not gone down. Mental health issues have not gone down. They're still going up. We're losing a battle, and this is one of those battlefields that we could all get involved in and help out.
Yeah.
And Michael, we salute you and the entire staff at Farr for the efforts you guys put in. How about sending everybody a good New Year's message there, buddy?
Yeah. Listen, 2025 is coming up, and there was a time 14 years ago where I dreaded the coming of a new year or getting a year older, but this thing just keeps getting more exciting every single year. So I wanted to wish everybody blessings and cheers and good times and bad times and the ability to get through it, and all sorts of love for you and your families. And please, like Scott said, reach out to us if you have any questions or want to talk or want to join forces with us or calling to tell us how much you hate us. That's okay. That is okay. And again, I understand where you're coming from. And Scott, to you and your family, best wishes for a very happy new year. Tell Karen I said hi and I love her to death. And we're going to make 2025 a great, great year, because here's the problem with our thing. Once we start resting and saying things like, "Oh, we have the opioid epidemic, under wraps," something new gets invented, and it never, ever, ever stops. And this is a 24-hour a day, type of environment where people are suffering and dying and looking for all sorts of stuff. And if people like Scott and organizations like Farr and all the other stakeholders that we don't work with don't keep their foot on the gas, this thing could overtake us very easily. So this is deadly serious business. We love to have a great time, but this is life and death stuff here.
Well, Michael, thank you. We've been talking to Michael Schlossman, the CEO from Farr, the Florida Association of Recovery Residences. Please check them out, get some more information. And for you families out there, if you're looking for a sober living home, a good place to start your search is with Farr. They can tell you what's in the area, what they know about the places, and you will know that there's something larger than just the home backing up your family member and working hard to create successful recovery circumstances. So for all of us here at Sober Life Studios and One Brother, One Sister, and all of our friends at Farr, this has been the Farr and Beyond Podcast. My guest, Michael Schlossman, Scott Jones, everybody have a great, happy, and joyous New Year.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.